Zombie TV shows have been lying to you for years. Not about the zombies, those are fine, but about everything else. From magical gasoline that never expires, to survivors drinking pond water like it's a Brita filter, the actual survival mistakes are so bad they'd kill you faster than any walker. So, today, we're breaking down everything zombie shows get completely wrong, starting with the dumbest one, the clean-shaven apocalypse. Can we talk about Rick Grimes' jawline for a second? The man wakes up from a coma, walks into a collapsed civilization, and somehow maintains a freshly shaved face for weeks. Somebody found a Gillette sponsorship in the apocalypse. Here's the thing. Human facial hair grows about 0.3 to 0.5 millimeters per day. Maintaining that clean look requires sharp razors, clean water, and time. Every single day. That's 2 to 3 liters of clean water per week just for shaving. Water that could go toward drinking, cooking, or cleaning wounds. But it gets better. Shaving in unsanitary conditions isn't just wasteful, it's actively dangerous. Dragging a dull, dirty blade across your face creates microcuts that are basically open invitations for bacterial infections like staph and strep. In low hygiene environments without access to antibiotics, even a minor skin infection can turn into cellulitis or abscess. So, congratulations, you wasted your clean water and turned a tiny nick into a potentially life-threatening problem. In any real survival hierarchy, grooming ranks dead last. Food, water, shelter, security, those come first. Looking production ready for the camera? Not on the list. The clean-shaven apocalypse isn't a character choice. It's a filming decision, but at least a skin infection won't kill you. Losing your ability to walk? That's a different story entirely. Ignoring footwear? Here's a survival fact that will genuinely annoy you. In every major military conflict and historical survival scenario on record, foot injuries account for roughly 24% of all debilitating injuries. Not gunshot wounds, not starvation, feet. And yet every single zombie show treats footwear like it's an afterthought. Let me explain why this matters. Trench foot can develop in as little as 12 hours of continuous moisture exposure. You don't need freezing temperatures. You just need wet socks and no way to dry them. That's it. Your feet start swelling, the skin breaks down, and within days, you're looking at permanent tissue damage or amputation. In a world where you need to outrun the undead, losing the ability to walk isn't an inconvenience. It's a death sentence. But it gets worse. Blisters and foot infections reduce your mobility by 60 to 80% within a week. And functional footwear? It degrades after 500 to 1,000 kilometers of travel on rough terrain. Characters in Fear the Walking Dead sprint across broken highways, rocky desert, and muddy forests in boots that somehow never wear down. Zero cumulative damage. Zero blisters. Zero limping. Nobody wants to hear this. But in real prepper and military communities, sock quality consistently ranks higher than weapons as a survival priority. Your apocalypse survival doesn't hinge on finding a katana. It hinges on moisture-wicking wool socks and boots that actually fit. Unglamorous? Absolutely. But you can't fight what you can't run from. And speaking of weapons that look cool but don't hold up to scrutiny, let's talk about everyone's favorite silent killer, crossbows as the ultimate silent weapon. Look, I need to address something, and I know this is going to upset people. Daryl Dixon's crossbow is one of the most iconic weapons in television history. It's cool, it looks amazing, and it makes absolutely zero tactical sense for surviving a zombie apocalypse. Let me explain. A crossbow has an effective, accurate range of 20 to 40 meters in trained hands. A standard rifle operates at 100 to 300 meters or more. That alone should end the conversation. But it doesn't, because the real problem is speed. Reloading a crossbow takes 6 to 15 seconds per bolt. A rifle? 2 to 4 seconds per round. So in any sustained encounter, a crossbow user is firing 3 to 8 times slower than someone with a basic firearm. Against a single walker in the woods? Sure, the crossbow works. Against a horde? That reload gap gets you killed every single time. But here's the thing. The whole argument for crossbows is silence, right? You don't attract more zombies with noise. Except suppressed firearms using subsonic ammunition exist. They're quieter than a crossbow's mechanical snap. They fire faster, they hit harder at range, and the ammo is infinitely more available than specialized crossbow bolts. And that's the other problem nobody talks about. Bolts aren't just sticks with points on them. Proper crossbow bolts require specific wood or carbon properties, precise fletching, and specialized tooling to manufacture. You can't scavenge them from a gas station. You can't whittle one by a campfire and expect it to fly straight. Every bolt you lose is a bolt you're probably never replacing. Daryl's crossbow survives in The Walking Dead for one reason. It looks cool on screen. That's it. It's character identity, not survival strategy. But if you think a bad weapon choice is dangerous, wait until you see what these characters are wearing into combat zones. Wearing short sleeves in bite zones. This one drives drives me insane. You live in a world where a single bite ends your life, and you're walking around in a tank top. That's not a fashion choice. That's a death wish. Here's the thing. Protective clothing like denim, leather, even heavy cotton reduces bite penetration depth by 60 to 80%. That's not a small margin. That's the difference between a scratch and a death sentence. And it gets better. Covered limbs reduce transmission risk from biological contact by 70 to 90%. In a world where you're constantly stepping through blood, gore, and infected material, that margin is everything. But characters in The Walking Dead spend entire seasons running through hordes in t-shirts. Glenn, Maggie, half the cast. Arms completely exposed in the highest contact scenarios imaginable. It's baffling. And before someone says, well, it's hot outside, long sleeves would be miserable. No, long sleeves actually provide thermal regulation in both cold and heat. Evaporative cooling works better with a light fabric layer than with bare skin baking in direct sunlight. There is literally zero downside to covering your arms in a zombie apocalypse. Zero. What's funny is the show eventually figured this out. Later seasons of The Walking Dead show survivors shifting to heavier, reinforced clothing specifically designed for bite protection, which is a tacit admission that every wardrobe choice before that was wrong. The show corrected itself mid-run and hoped nobody would notice. Real survival clothing hierarchy goes like this: protection first, temperature regulation second, identity last. TV shows completely invert that, putting character aesthetics and visual identity above everything else. Looking cool doesn't matter when your forearm is getting chewed on, but if exposed skin is a problem, wait until you hear about the fuel situation, because that one breaks physics. The magic fuel mystery. Let's do some math, and I promise this is the fun kind. Gasoline starts degrading after 3 to 6 months without stabilizers. The octane rating drops 1 to 2 points every single month, meaning whatever fuel is sitting in gas stations and abandoned cars is slowly turning into useless sludge. But that's not even the real problem. The real problem is supply. When the grid collapses, fuel distribution stops within 7 to 14 days. No refineries running, no tanker trucks delivering, nothing. Whatever fuel exists in the world is whatever's already sitting in tanks, and no new production is coming back online for 18 to 24 months minimum. That's it. That's all you get. Now here's where it gets fun. A typical SUV burns 8 to 12 liters per 100 kilometers. A full tank gets you maybe 300 to 500 kilometers before you're walking. That sounds reasonable until you look at what The Walking Dead actually asks us to believe. By season 5, these characters have covered over 3,000 kilometers by vehicle. That requires somewhere between 6,000 and 9,000 liters of fuel. 6,000 liters. In a world where nobody is making gasoline, nobody is distributing gasoline, and whatever gasoline exists is chemically degrading every single day. The show never explains this, never sources it, never even acknowledges it, and we don't need a fictional apocalypse to prove the math is broken. The 1973 oil crisis caused fuel shortages within days, and that was with infrastructure still standing. Hurricane Katrina drained gas stations dry in hours. Now imagine every refinery on the continent is offline permanently. A group that depends on vehicles and runs out of fuel isn't just inconvenienced. They're stranded, immobile, and completely exposed. But if the fuel logistics are bad, wait until you see how these shows handle base defense, specifically their obsession with building fortresses out of clear glass windows. Building bases with clear glass windows. Once you notice this, you will never be able to unsee it. Every single fortified community in zombie TV has the same fatal design flaw. Clear windows, open sight lines, visible interiors. It's basically hanging a neon sign that says, "Survivors inside. Come take our stuff." Here's the thing. Unobstructed glass windows reduce your defensive advantage by 40 to 60% compared to opaque barriers. You can see out, sure, but everything outside can see exactly where you are, how many of you there are, what weapons you're carrying, and where your weak points are. That's not a base. That's a fishbowl. And it gets worse when hostile survivors enter the equation. A decent pair of binoculars or a rifle scope can map your entire interior layout from 300 meters away without you ever knowing. In a world where the living are more dangerous than the dead, clear windows are a tactical advertisement for every raider group within line of sight. You're giving away head counts, patrol schedules, and supply levels for free. But here's where it gets really obvious. Every historical fortification tradition on Earth, from medieval castles to World War II bunkers, minimizes transparent surfaces. That's not a coincidence. That's thousands of years of people learning the hard way that being seen gets you killed. Concealment, layered barriers, defense in depth. These are the fundamentals. Now look at the hilltop in The Walking Dead. Clear wooden fencing, visible interior structures, zero concealment. It's a direct inversion of actual fortification doctrine. The reason? Production needs the camera to see inside. That's it. It's a filming choice disguised as a survival strategy. Glass also creates light leakage at night, turning your base into a beacon. It reflects noise outward, advertising activity. And when it breaks, you don't get a crack. You get a catastrophic breach point. 3 separate problems wrapped in one architectural choice that nobody on screen ever questions. But if poorly designed bases bother you, wait until you see how these shows handle the weapons inside them. Infinite ammo. Let's talk about the single most frustrating thing in zombie television if you know anything about firearms. Rick Grimes fires hundreds of rounds across multiple seasons of The Walking Dead. Hundreds. And not once do you see him sit down and clean his weapon. Not once does he source ammunition. Not once does his gun jam, misfire, or fail in any way. That's not dramatic license. That's a fantasy. Here's the reality. A standard rifle magazine holds 20 to 30 rounds. Now picture a horde encounter. Say 20 to 50 zombies closing in on your position. Under combat stress, trained shooters hit their target only 15 to 30% of the time. That means you're burning through 70 to 330 rounds just to survive a single encounter. 1. And that magazine count evaporates fast when you're not calmly lining up headshots from a safe distance. But ammunition supply isn't even the biggest problem. It's ammunition quality. Ammo stored in suboptimal conditions. And by that, I mean humidity, temperature swings. Basically, any post-apocalyptic environment you can imagine develops a 15 to 25% failure and misfire rate after just 12 to 18 months. Sure, properly stored ammunition can last 50 years or more. Military surplus rounds from World War II still fire today. But properly stored means climate-controlled, dry, consistent temperature. Good luck finding that when civilization has collapsed. Then there's the weapon itself. Firearms need cleaning and maintenance every 200 to 500 rounds. Skip that, and accuracy degrades 15 to 35% per 500 rounds fired. Jamming increases. Eventually, mechanical failure becomes a certainty, not a possibility. A certainty. This is exactly why gun communities and military veterans have been saying for years that realistic survivors would transition to melee and silent weapons over time. Not because it looks cool on camera, because ammunition runs out and weapons break. A firearm that jams during a horde encounter doesn't give you a second chance. It gives you a funeral. But if weapon failures can get you killed in seconds, the thing that destroys most survival groups takes a little longer, and it comes from inside the group itself. The fallacy of constant internal drama. Here's the thing nobody wants to admit. The part of zombie shows you complain about the most is also the part that's actively getting every character killed. And I'm not talking about bad writing, I'm talking about biology. Let's get the obvious out of the way first. The Walking Dead spends roughly 40 to 50% of its episode runtime on internal arguments, betrayals, power struggles, and emotional breakdowns. Fans hate it. They call it soap opera filler. They beg for more zombie action. And then they keep watching because human conflict is inherently compelling television. That tension between what works as entertainment and what works as survival strategy is the entire problem. Because in real disaster scenarios, interpersonal conflict increases survival failure rates by 35 to 47% compared to cohesive groups. That's not a guess. That's documented across multiple disaster psychology studies. The 1972 Andes flight disaster survivors maintained strict emotional discipline and group hierarchy, and their survival rate was 3 to 4 times higher than what fractured, emotionally chaotic groups achieve in comparable scenarios. Shackleton's Antarctic expedition followed the same pattern. Emotional cohesion wasn't a luxury, it was the survival mechanism. But here's where it gets worse. The damage isn't just strategic, it's chemical. Chronic group conflict elevates cortisol levels in every single person involved. Sustained cortisol elevation impairs decision-making, degrades immune function, disrupts sleep quality, and reduces cognitive performance by 30 to 50%. Your body literally stops working properly when you're surrounded by constant social stress. Every screaming match at Alexandria is making those people dumber, sicker, and slower. Well-disciplined historical expeditions recorded mutiny or group fracture in fewer than 8% of cases. 8%. Compare that to Rick's group, where someone is staging a coup or having an emotional meltdown every other episode. The cruel irony is almost poetic. The drama that makes the show watchable is precisely the behavior pattern that guarantees extinction in a real collapse. Television has accidentally been documenting how not to survive for over a decade, and we've been entertained the entire time. But at least arguing with your friends won't physically destroy your intestines. Drinking unfiltered creek water absolutely will. Drinking random surface water. This one looks like nothing on screen. A character kneels by a river, cups their hands, takes a sip. Background action. Nobody even comments on it. But that single sip might be the most statistically dangerous thing any survivor does in the entire show. Here's why. Untreated surface water contains anywhere from 10,000 to 1 million colony-forming units of bacteria per milliliter. Safe drinking water sits below 100. That's not a small gap. That's multiple orders of magnitude between river water and water that won't destroy you from the inside out. We're talking Giardia, Cryptosporidium, E. coli, cholera. Some of these hit fast. E. coli can drop you within 12 to 72 hours. Others are slower and nastier. Giardia takes up to 25 days to show symptoms, and Cryptosporidium can lurk for nearly 2 weeks before it wrecks you. Either way, once they hit, you're done. Dysentery alone reduces mobility and cognitive function by 40 to 60%. You can't run. You can't think clearly. You can't fight. You're a liability to every single person around you. And it gets worse. Cholera and dysentery mortality rates in untreated conditions hit 20 to 50%. Even if you survive, recovery locks you down for 7 to 14 days of near total immobility. In a group survival scenario, one sick person creates cascading vulnerability. Someone has to guard them. Someone has to share water. Everyone's movement slows to accommodate the weakest link. One sip from a creek can cripple an entire group for 2 weeks. But here's the fact that reframes everything. Historically, waterborne illness was the single largest killer in wartime and disaster scenarios. Not combat, not bullets, not explosions. Disease killed roughly 5 soldiers for every 3 killed by enemy fire in the American Civil War. Dirty water was deadlier than the actual war. Characters in The Walking Dead drink from rivers and lakes constantly without any visible treatment. And even if they did boil water, the resource math is brutal. Purifying enough water for a group of 6 to 8 people requires over 10 liters of fuel per day. Fuel that directly competes with cooking and heating. You can't just boil it and move on. It's a full-time logistical operation. The invisible threats are always the ones TV ignores. But if untreated water can quietly dismantle a group from the inside, wait until you see what a single untreated paper cut can do. Neglecting basic infection control for minor wounds. This is the one that doesn't look like a trope. There's no dramatic moment, no obvious oversight, no character making a stupid decision in front of the camera. It's just a slow, invisible accumulation of small wounds that nobody treats. And it's the most realistic killer that zombie TV completely ignores. Here's the math. The average person in a collapse scenario sustains 10 to 20 minor wounds per month. Cuts from debris, scrapes from rough terrain, abrasions from physical labor. In a world with no antibiotics, no sterile bandages, and limited sanitation, those minor wounds carry a 30 to 60% infection rate. Not zombie bites, not gunshot wounds. Cuts and scrapes. Now let that compound across a group of 10 survivors over a few weeks. Untreated infection progresses to sepsis in 3 to 7 days. Sepsis mortality without antibiotics approaches 40 to 60%. Death follows within 5 to 14 days of symptom onset. A scratch on your forearm becomes a death sentence on a 2-week timeline. And that's not even the worst case. Necrotizing fasciitis, flesh-eating disease, can progress from a minor wound to full limb loss or death within 24 to 48 hours. It doesn't require a zombie bite to start. It just requires bacteria and broken skin. The Walking Dead treats minor wounds the way most shows do. A character gets cut, winces, maybe wraps it with a dirty rag, and the injury vanishes from the narrative entirely. But in every documented historical survival scenario, infection was the leading cause of death. Not combat, not injury severity, infection. During the American Civil War, more soldiers died from infected wounds than from bullets. 2/3 of all deaths were disease, not battlefield trauma. Medieval warfare, same story. Modern disaster response, same pattern. Every medical professional who watches zombie TV points to this as the single biggest lie on screen. Not the horde fights, not the impossible headshots. The fact that a splinter in the wrong environment kills you just as dead as a walker, and nobody ever acknowledges it. Zombie shows are obsessed with dramatic deaths, heroic last stands, brutal betrayals. But real survival math says the unglamorous stuff is what actually gets you, not the bite, the scratch you didn't clean. If you enjoyed this video and want to see why you can't survive Resident Evil zombies, click the video on the screen now.